Some of the best advice I'm currently clinging on to is to find yourself, you have to lose yourself. Autonomy and control are all needs we need to reconcile with. Finding control within yourself, taking back control, being in control. And that's why I so deeply resonate with Janet Jackson's music. Starting with Control in 1986, Janet delves deep into the theme of control, and the music thematically and lyrically uncovers her evolution as a woman. The apex of the arc that began with Control through to Rhythm Nation and Janet period is 1997's The Velvet Rope. One of the greatest artistic achievements of all time, The Velvet Rope takes all the layers of Janet's exploration on the theme of control from her previous projects and speaks so beautifully to a world with a frayed relationship with intimacy, boundaries and connection. She finds a place of resolute in 2001's All For You, but The Velvet Rope will be the main focus of this series, with the first 3 episodes acting as world building and important analysis to inform the bigger discussion and deep dive of The Velvet Rope. So without further ado, this is Behind the Velvet Rope, Janet Jackson on Control.
The Jackson family, even without the contributions of Janet and her brother, are music royalty. It's a true rags to riches story, how Joe Jackson engineered his family of 10 children out of a 2-bedroom house in Gary, Indiana, into a multi-million-dollar empire. We all know this started with the Jackson 5, but it bloomed into solo careers, world tours, TV shows, and even a Vegas residency with all 10 children. What you can see in front of you is not only all the Jackson 5 albums, but all of the solo projects that the Jacksons released from 1969 just until the release of Control. And it shows you how insane the Jackson production output is. Before Janet released Control in 1986, the family had released over 40 albums over a 15-year time span. Every sibling, barring Tito, Marlon, and Randy, had released at least one solo project.
Secret, yeah? This is Michael Jackson's best song. Miss Ruby. This is the next song that we're taking, yeah? Girl Center.
And this was literally millions and millions of albums sold. And a lot of this, despite the immense talent, was due to their father, who they all called Joe. A very strict, no-nonsense individual, he forced them to work. With Janet's Lifetime documentary from earlier this year, there seems to be a real effort to kind of rewrite the narrative of Joe as an abusive father, but the first-hand accounts from his children, particularly Michael and Janet, lead me to believe this was the reality. I think he saw the way he treated his children as a trade-off to living that American dream. But as we will explore with The Velvet Rope, this had a long-lasting psychological impact, not just on Janet, but all of them. He was in control of all of his children's careers as their manager, and he restricted the things in which it was possible for them to do. But what you start to see as the Jackson brothers got older, they were able to release themselves from Joe's tight grip. Michael, after the release of Off the Wall, which was a smash success, he fired his father as his manager, replacing him with Joe Branca, who was very instrumental to the epic success of Thriller. The other members of the Jackson 5 did the same as a group in 1983, and around this time, due to the success of Thriller and also the Victory Tour, this is what truly kind of caused a wedge between Michael and the rest of the family. But I think for Janet, as the baby sibling, as you kind of see with the start of her career, it's very evident how Joe projected his frustrations about his children gaining independence onto Janet, and he was very uber focused in making her a star in his own image. This resulted in her first 2 albums, Janet Jackson and Jean Street. Very decent pop albums under the label A&M. They have this reputation of being bland albums without any soul, and I don't necessarily think that's a fair assessment of the albums, and I think they are in need of some form of cultural reassessment and the way we consider the albums and the way they fit into Janet's discography. The music, production-wise, is very on pulse with the state of 80s R&B and funk. And I think what it actually does is it does speak to the strength of Joe Jackson and how he had a very strong direction and also discernment of the culture and how Janet could perhaps fit into that. 1982's Janet Jackson, I think, is actually a really, really solid album. I think it's the better of the two, with a lot of the music sonically sounding very similar to Thriller. Say You Do and Young Love are, for me, what the standouts of the album, especially Young Love. It's sonically the sister of my favourite track on Thriller, Baby Be Mine. And with 1984's Dream Street, it leans more into like a synth pop sound with a very strong Prince influence, which is evident as one of the members of the time, a funk group formed by Prince, produced 2 tracks on the album. More on the time later. And to be honest, a lot of the songs on the album aren't too far from the kind of sonic landscapes that Janet would tread with Control 2 years later. Both albums commercially faltered, not really doing anything chart-wide. And again, critically, it didn't really do anything, with it kind of coming across as Janet and the team behind her just using the same strategy that had been used with a lot of Jackson 5 and Jackson solo releases. It's really throwing whatever to the wall and hoping it sticks. And it just really didn't. And she even admitted that it wasn't really the music that she wanted to be doing. She was really only pushed into the music industry after Joe forced her, after she was caught writing and recording poems by her brothers. However, she did really kind of have no choice. It's the same thing with a lot of the acting roles she was doing at the time. She was doing what was expected of her as part of the Jackson family. There was no real opportunity for her to input, to speak her mind, or do what she wanted. And in Janet's eyes, there was only one real way for her to gain that independence that she desired. She got married, and that was a thing that a lot of the Jacksons tended to do in order to escape their father. Like, you'll see, like, with a lot of her brothers, they would get married at 18, 19, and that's how bad it was. She got married to R&B singer James DeBarge of the group DeBarge, who was a drug addict and in many ways exploited Janet's innocence. And the energy that I believe Janet would have envisioned for herself as a woman within her own household was occupied extending herself to an individual that didn't show her much love and respect. After a year within that abusive marriage, there was an annulment. Basically, Janet's back to square one in terms of her seeking that true sense of autonomy and independence on her own terms. So she finally cut ties with her father, firing him as manager and choosing to fully commit herself to music on her own terms. Under the management of A&M, A&R executive John McClain, she basically began this search for producers to work with on her next project. And after seeing them live with their group at the time, she approached Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis to produce her third studio album. One of the things that Jam and Lewis were adamant about is that the album would be produced in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in their Flight Time studios, truly free from the oversight of her father. And during the production of the album, Jam and Lewis really spent time getting to know Janet and allowing her to speak her mind within and about the music. And across the 10 tracks of her third studio album, Control, we finally get to meet Janet, a woman who's clearly young and learning about herself, but has the willingness and confidence to choose to assert herself. This album in many ways is about self-actualizations, and that's why it's one of my favorite albums of all time, because the way it expresses that feeling of your youth and that experience of the first time. When I think of you and the Pleasure Principle speak on the joy of first love, the title track, Control, is the album's thesis statement, declaring Janet's artistic and personal intent loud and clear. A diss track in its own right. The music video conceptualizes the real conflict between Janet and her father and her trying to find independence in her own music and what feels like her. Nasty, What Have You Done For Me Lately, and He Doesn't Know I'm Alive speaks to the gender battlefield of modern romance and relationships, both reflecting her failed marriage with DeBarge and her then recent experiences. Nasty is influenced by an incident of sexual harassment. When reflecting on the meaning of the song, she says, "The danger hit home when a couple of guys started stalking me in the street. They were emotionally abusive, sexually threatening. Instead of running to Jimmy or Terry for protection, I took a stand. I backed them down." That's how songs like Nasty or What Have You Done For Me Lately were born, out of a sense of self-defense. Control meant not only taking care of myself, but living in a less protected world. And doing that meant growing a tough skin, getting attitude. And that growing attitude is represented in the look of the era. Hard, edgy looks with a militaristic feel. Janet, in some sense, is ready for battle, strengthened by her experience and confidence. Even the choreography, choreographed by Jackie Jackson's mistress and future pop star in her own right, Paul Abdul. It's very strong yet graceful. And in these revolutionary music videos, Janet is positioned as an equal or even a superior to the male dancers featured. This album is a feminist statement, and the fresh, innovative New Jack Swing helps give the album its grit. The two last tracks on the album, Let's Wait a While and Funny How Time Flies When You're Having Fun, are probably the two most important tracks on the album, exploring an important part of growing up, sex and sensuality. Let's Wait a While is a track about abstinence and being comfortable enough to have sex with the one that you love. Which is important, particularly as Janet is someone who rushed into an abusive marriage. And also the song is written at the height of the AIDS pandemic. Funny How Time Flies When You're Having Fun is a more sensual, quiet storm track with rhythmic moaning towards the end of the track, which was actually quite uncomfortable for Janet's mother.
Well, actually, it wasn't Nasty. She loves Nasty and she loves the video. It was Let's Wait a While. Not Let's Wait a While, but Funny How Time Flies. Because by me being the baby of the family, she really couldn't get into the moaning.
Found you growing up.
Yeah.
I see.
It's sort of difficult for her.
But again, it's a sign of a woman coming into her own sexuality and ownership, an important part of Janet's music. Reaching number 1 on the Billboard 200 charts with 5 top 5 singles and 1 number 1. Control succeeds both commercially and critically, being a powerful testament to the magic of a woman stepping into her own autonomy and strength. 10 million copies later, Control serves as a hallmark for female pop, and for Janet, it's the very beginning of her exploration as Control and what that means to her as a woman.
This is my very first number 1 song. I'm a baby, I'm 58 and still serving.
Oh, baby, every time my world gets crazy, all I have to do is call you. It's just think of you. 'Cause when I think of you, baby, nothing else seems to matter. 'Cause when I think of you, baby, all I think about is our love.
And what's the thing you do when you find your place in the world? You wish to change it. Rhythm Nation 1814 is another seminal work from Janet, with it being a concept album focusing on socially conscious issues and unity in order to solve those issues. As the leader of this Rhythm Nation, Janet promises to heal the world and its ills through dance, music, and love. And particularly for Janet, with the cultural impact of Control as like a feminist statement, artistically there's a desire to continue in that same vein of empowerment through the music. And that's very evident with the same grit and edge of the Control era being carried over into the Rhythm Nation 1814 era. Ultimately, it's this. Once you take control of yourself, you feel like you can have control of the environment around you. And I feel like once you take control of yourself, you feel like you have the power to control or even change the world around you, that being positive or negative. So Rhythm Nation, State of the World, and The Knowledge start the 20-track suite, which includes 8 interludes, with the socially conscious theme being put at the forefront. It was believed that this would cause a negative impact on sales. Producer Jimmy Jam says this: if you take the same album, and this would have been the safe way to go, imagine a beautiful coloured picture of Janet on the cover, the album entitled Escapade. We start the album with Miss You Much, then To Love Will Never Do, then to Escapade, and we put all the fun songs up front. And then on side 2, the last 3 or 4 tracks would have been Living in a World They Didn't Make, The Knowledge.
Let's go, let's go!
'And Rhythm Nation, and it would have been an afterthought. They're the same songs, Rhythm Nation, and it would have been an afterthought. They're the same songs, but would it have had the same impact? However, this decision to focus on the social commentary, it paid off, and the album was a smash success commercially, with the hard-hitting lyrical content and Jam and Lewis leaning deeper into the New Jack Swing genre and introducing sampling. The album penetrated both the charts and popular culture, especially with the youth. And along with the social commentary, this album just has bops like Miss You Much, Escapade, Love Will Never Do Without You, all tracks that hit #1, and Alright. These songs carry the optimism and youthful era of Control. It's the fruits of Janet's emancipation. And it paid off as the album really propelled Janet to superstar heights on the level of Michael and Thriller, with the album selling 3 million copies in 4 months. It's the only album in history to have 7 and all of its commercial singles hit the top 5. And it's actually important to note that this stat is only because Alright hit #4. All the other tracks were either at #1 or 2. It's also the first and only album to produce different #1 singles across 3 separate years. 1988. (1990) and 1991. Rhythm Nation 1840 also became the best-selling album of 1990 in the US, and her first world tour in 1990, touring both the Control and Rhythm Nation albums. It's still now the most successful debut tour of all time. However, I do think with all of this success of Rhythm Nation 1840, I do think in terms of artistic intent and its conceptualization, it's not as successful as Control. The idea of Janet centering herself as some revolutionary leader is not only misguided, but even a lot of the social commentary within the album is quite half-baked. It's actually a dilemma that Janet explores in her song Shoulda Known Better from her 2015 album Unbreakable. And like, if you hear the song, it's a very transparent reflection about the kind of naivety of the concept of Rhythm Nation 1840 and how she kind of inadvertently becomes the poster child of being naive. It's an acknowledgement that due to her youth and in some ways her privilege, the surface level that the album promotes just isn't enough to achieve the kind of goals of a world rid of color lines.
I had this great epiphany, and Rhythm Nation was the dream. I guess next time I'll know better.
Producer Jimmy Jam also says this: when you're young, you feel like I can change the world. I'm gonna lead the revolution. And then you look back 25 years later and you go, okay, I should have known better. The same problems still exist, but there's a different way to go about tackling it. It still involves mobilizing people, but I can't do it by myself. It's just a wiser, more mature look at the reality of trying to make a positive change, a social change. And I think what they both say is really important in the analysis of Janet's career. There is this evolution in who Janet is and how she's relating to the theme of control. Control and Rhythm Nation kind of sit in the same territory. In some ways, Control is us looking at Janet exploring the theme of control inwardly, but it's also about her being exposed to the real world, this different environment, and finding control within that. And then obviously Rhythm Nation is about theme of control being expressed outwardly and how to take control of the things that we perhaps perceive to be wrong in society. I think after Rhythm Nation, there's definitely a need for Janet to shift her perspective on control from viewing it as an outward thing to a more inward thing. Janet in the next album era labels both Control and Rhythm Nation as heavy projects. Control definitely seems to be something to seize, to conquer, to take hold of. This is evident with both projects' proximity to like militarism and masculinity. Something that would be necessary, because it's also something that we see Michael do a lot. He tends to lean into military aesthetics to illustrate his desire for power and respect. However, for Janet, in this next album, there's a shift. For Janet, she learns that in order to fully exercise her control, she needs to let go. Someday Is Tonight is the final track on Rhythm Nation 1840, and it continues the tradition in Control of having the more sensuous tracks towards the end of the album. The song is considered a sequel to Let's Wait a While, Janet's ode to sexual abstinence. In the song, we see a Janet that is ready and mature enough for sexual relations with her partner. When reflecting on the song, she says, Someday Is Tonight is a continuation of, okay, now you've waited this long. And I even say it in the song.
You know I promised I'd be worth the wait. Now the wait is over, baby. Please don't hesitate.
Someone told me a long time ago about the Janet album being very sensual and sexy. What's the message you're sending to the kids? You've talked about let's wait a while. And I said, well, I'm in my 20s now. How long do you want me to wait? And most importantly, she says this: I felt more comfortable letting people a little more into my world. And this speaks to the evolution on the theme of control, particularly as we approach the Janet era. Rhythm Nation 1814 sees a woman who is beginning to operate in her full autonomy and control, who believes that gives her the power to change the world around her. I think Janet, we see her perhaps understanding that the intent of Rhythm Nation was a bit too ambitious, but she does have the power to impact her direct sphere. And she does have true ownership over her choices, her career, her body, her pleasure. In true control, there is freedom. And sex and sensuality is the way Janet chooses to express and explore this. This has been a growing motif in Janet's music. Again, Let's Wait a While and Finding How Time Flies on Control. Then Lone, I Need Some Water. I didn't want off talking. My throat's a bit dry. And then Lonely, Come Back to Me, and Someday Is Tonight showing a woman growing into her sexuality and sensuality on Rhythm Nation. Another important song which positioned Janet as a sex symbol during the Rhythm Nation era was Love Will Never Do, the final commercial single on the album, which did go to #1, and its music video. It's the most stripped version of Janet that we've seen. Even in the other non-social commentary tracks such as All Right or Miss You Much, Janet is normally presenting in quite a modest and in some ways, again, masculine fashion. But in this video, there is a stark difference. She is more sensual, leaning into her femininity and being more openly, physically intimate and affectionate with her partner in the video. It also gives insight into her vision of sexuality and how she chooses to frame it, and with an equal focus given to the male form in the video and the chemistry and the intimacy between the male and the female. And it served as a perfect transition to the album, which is an opening up of Janet. The sonic profile of the album is much more flavored than her two previous outputs. And again, the songs speak about love, relationships and sex, and also lust in a very open and honest poetic way. When I wrote the album, I was still in a very poetic frame of mind, inspired by Maya Angelou's beautiful language. You can hear that inspiration on the interlude and especially on the song New Agenda. This time I felt much freer expressing myself. That's The Way Love Goes, the lead single and first track on the album, is an R&B, trip-hop, funk song which oozes with a sensuality that feels light, genuine and playful. Janet vocally as well as lyrically has found her sweet spot. If is a masterpiece. It's just this innovative, genre-bending track which puts lyrically female pleasure at its center. And can you hear the "Someday We'll Be Together" sample? Sorry. The music, sorry. Like this vision of sexual liberation, and she just doesn't care. Like she doesn't care. And same with Throb. Throb is like this house track which is deep erotica. And even with Again is a emotional ballad which was used for the film Poetic Justice. Poetic Justice is quite an important element in the evolution of Janet. It's a film starring Tupac, and when she's talking about being in that poetic kind of mood and wanting to explore the themes of relationship and intimacy, that film was like a big part of why. But it also has this music video which is really fixated on physical and emotional intimacy from the partner that Janet is longing to be with again. And the album climaxes very much literally with anytime, any place.
In the thundering rain, stare into my heart. I can feel your lips. I don't wanna stop just because you feel so good inside of my love. I'm not gonna stop, no. I want you. All I'm gonna say is, hey, anytime.
It's this 7-minute epic filled with both tension and release. Again, Janet has found like this perfect mastery with her softer vocals, the lyricism, and the music video is just like this unfiltered expression of a woman just so comfortable in her sexuality. And there's even a scene where a grandma is watching Janet get head from the window, and she just doesn't care. Like, and I think that's why this album is so pivotal, not just from an artistic level but culturally. It's about finding so much power in your own autonomy and being free enough to like express such an intimate part of yourself and be so confident with it, and also be able to demand and make known what you want and what you desire, being Janet's focus with this album. She says, you see, sex isn't just fire and heat, it's natural beauty, doing what comes naturally. It's letting go, giving and getting what you need. In the age of AIDS, it requires being responsible. On a psychological level though, good sex, satisfying sex, is also linked with losing yourself, releasing, using your body to get out of your body. Well, for the first time, I'm feeling free. I'm feeling deeply sexual, and I don't mind letting the world know. For me, sex has become a celebration, a joyous part of the creative process. I've become a woman who finally feels good about her sexuality, says Janet, to demand a man's respect. It's insulting to be seen as some object. He must call her by name. It's not a brazen demand. I didn't want to get obnoxious, but I wanted to make it clear. Women want satisfaction, and so do men. But to get it, you've got to ask for it. Know what you need, say what you need. Sexual communication is the name of the game. Intimacy. But it's also interesting because when you hear what she's saying and how her doing this is almost a political, cultural statement, a lot of her intentions behind this album is essentially what Rhythm Nation was in essence. But even the deeper messaging behind it about, you know, sexual communication, sexual liberation, it just materializes better. Even the socially conscious track of the album, New Agenda, approaches the social commentary with from a much more wiser and pragmatic perspective. Speaking directly to the African American community, the song addresses misogyny and sexism within the black community, featuring artist Chuck D encouraging the men of the community to step it up, to better protect, support and stand with the women, rather than contributing to the oppression of both black women and men. And see how it's a change from Rhythm Nation's tone. Rhythm Nation is very much like, wow, look at the problem. I can fix it. Like, let's just fix it. And it's going to, this system is complex. I can't change the system all by myself and all at once. But what can I help with? And how can I hope that my contribution, however small, can have a ripple effect? And the whole album, in my opinion, accomplishes this feat. On academic level, it's discussed how Janet's sexual freedom through her art contributed to a higher degree of sexual freedom amongst women and a changing attitude towards female pleasure, such as female received head. Ultimately, it speaks to how wielding control of yourself enables a greater freedom. To present yourself authentically to the masses can allow you to have true influence to shape the world in the way you see fit. It requires you to let go of fear, tradition, or previously held beliefs. And it's actually really brave considering, one, she comes from a Jehovah's Witness background. There's like a funny bit in her recent documentary with Rebe, her sister, talking about the album, and she's like, I'm a Bible student, I'm a student of the word, and I live by principles.
I did not like it. My mom really didn't like it. Oh, wow. I'm a Bible student, and I try to live in harmony with principles. And it's not being prudish or anything like that. It's just that for me, that's private.
And two, Madonna's 1992 album Erotica and book Sex were viewed as massive misfires, and she received a lot of scrutiny. It was her first album not to go #1 since her breakout, her debut. And even Janet's sister LaToya tried to do like the whole pivot towards sex thing, and it didn't really work well. She actually posed nude for Playboy, saying that it was to show my parents that they couldn't dictate me anymore, that I control my life, which is funny because it's like the same themes are kind of coming out and the same things that we're seeing. And another thing Janet had to do in order to fully embody control, it was let go of the Jackson name. Like she's had 2 blockbuster albums. She was still in some ways existing in the shadow of her family, and especially Michael. This album is like a release from the ideology that she's dependent on, one, the success of her family, but it was also this idea of Janet as like a producer dependent artist that only started experiencing success once she started working with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. And that's why also on the credits she is a producer on all the tracks, and she's a writer on all the tracks. She'd mastered her sound, she'd mastered her production techniques. Really believe it shouldn't just be Jam and Lewis, but it should really be Jam, Lewis and Jackson. And she left A&M Records and signed with Virgin for a $40 million contract, becoming the world's highest paid musical act at that time. And Janet is still her best-selling album, period.
I'm sorry, y'all, whatever.
So with Control, we have a young woman gaining control and learning about the world for the first time. With Rhythm Nation, she utilizes that zeal and passion from her newly found control in order to go out and change and in some ways take control of the world and fix it of its social ills. With Janet, you have a less naive woman who realizes that true control doesn't give her ultimate power, but it gives her enough to take control of who she is as a woman and own it with pride. And in that control, there is freedom and the ability to let go. And all of these ideas and all these stages in Janet's evolution, in the way she perceives the idea of control, all collide into a nuanced exploration of self, identity, intimacy, relationships, and sex in The Velvet Rope. A lot of this discussion has been groundwork. It's been building a foundation to be able to better understand the deeper themes within The Velvet Rope. And however, there is one final piece to set, and I think this is really important because I think due to our prior understanding of Janet, we were not able to consider this piece in the way we analyze and critically assess the deeper themes and meaning of the songs within the album. And the final piece to set before we go behind the velvet rope is to discuss Rene Elizondo. Rene Elizondo is one of the most important parts of Janet Jackson's career and legacy, in my opinion, on the level of a Jam and Lewis. His influence is more his part in Janet's creative direction and business decisions, but due to the destruction of all personal and business ties with Janet after their separation and divorce at the turn of the century, and legal proceedings basically prohibiting both from really discussing their relationship and the demise in detail. For me, this is sad because he had a massive influence on why and how Janet explored certain subject material, especially with Janet Period and the Velvet Rope. And especially with the Velvet Rope, as I honestly cannot hear the lyrics and not think Rene. In a 2001 Entertainment Weekly article celebrating her upcoming album All For You, it says this: "If you're looking for a breakup album, Jackson and Jam say Rope is it. Even though technically it preceded the breakup with Elizondo, and even though Elizondo got a credit as Rope's co-writer and co-producer, All For You is being cast as the recovery album, the one that marks her escape from the gloom. Honestly," she says of the riff, "if it would have brought me down, the record would have been Joni Mitchell's Blue." The Velvet Rope is a concept album centered around introspection, but introspection which is focused on the relationships around Janet and how intimacy empowers her, but at the same time has a very unfulfilling quality. And I believe the catalyst to this exploration of both self and human intimacy was triggered by the breakdown in her relationship with Rene Elizondo, the most central relationship in her life. So Janet and Rene Elizondo met in about 1982, starting off as friends with no intention of being in a relationship. When Janet got her marriage to James DeBarge annulled nearing the end of 1985, Rene was a massive support to Janet during this time. But by 1987, they were in a committed relationship and engaged. In a 1998 article entitled Sex, Sadness and the Triumph of Janet Jackson, David Ritz writes his observation about Janet and Rene's relationship. "You cannot understand Janet without understanding Rene. For the past 12 years, they have been a team, a study in yin-yang. Janet is an introvert, Rene a rousing extrovert. Janet is a reluctant talker, Rene can riff for hours. They met when he was an assistant cameraman. His interests as a filmmaker, songwriter, and photographer are an envelope-pushing project." When I've watched Rene and Janet work together in their studio or discuss matters in their Malibu home, they appear as two halves of a whole. They are both lightning-fast thinkers, and one often completes a thought another has begun. There seems to be no hierarchy, no boss. They operate on the same wavelength. They are almost always together, and Rene, as chief advisor and constant collaborator, is intensely focused on Janet's career. He has had a creative hand in all of her videos since Rhythm Nation, and 3 of them, That's the Way Love Goes, Again, and the recent alternative version of Together Again, he directed. "Rene," says Janet, "has been my co-writer on almost all of my songs since Rhythm Nation, but has refused to take credit. He wanted to prove that he wasn't with me to take, but to give. I appreciate that attitude, but I also saw it was leading up to feelings of fraudulence on his part and mine. Make note of that." So by the time it comes to Rhythm Nation, Rene is fully part of the creative process. I think this is something we would recognize today as a creative director, but that back then that wasn't something that was a official label. He just acted as an extension of Janet as the person closest to her. He is shown extensively in making of videos, helping with choreography and commenting on the creative process. In 1991, the two wed. It's a secret, intimate wedding kept completely out of the public eye. And I think the marriage is actually a catalyst to where we do see Janet cross the boundary of sensual content and expression, with Love Will Never Do being in 1991 and the Janet album. It makes sense, again, with Janet's religious background, that her being a married woman legitimizes her public exploration of sex and why she would feel so comfortable to finally open up. And again, Rene seems to be a big part of why. He directed the videos for That's the Way Love Goes and Again, which are incredibly sensual videos, especially the video Again, which focuses on the sexual and physical chemistry between Janet and the male partner in her video. And there's a part in the Janet doc showing the filming of the Again video. It's remarkable how well he as a director was able to frame Janet so successfully as a sex icon. Janet and Rene seem committed to cultivating this version of Janet to serve as a fantasy for the general public. And it could be argued that as a husband, this fantasy is serving him and his pleasure too. It's a quote like this that she says in 1983. She says, "And that's why Rene suggested I surround myself with the kids in the dance troupe and let me relax, just be myself." There's this dynamic coming across, which is very symbiotic in nature. At the end of their marriage in 2000, Rene essentially comes out and he makes certain claims about his character. One of them being that he exhibits dependent characteristic. This is argued that it resulted in him being submissive to Janet and him making self-sacrifices. And this could be interpreted as him subverting all of his own general and creative energy to the betterment of Janet's career. To me, this illustrates what seems to be the paradoxical relationship that they had. In some ways, Rene is submissive to Janet and willing to give to her and her career. However, in other ways, there's a version of Rene that I perceive to be controlling and invasive of Janet's boundaries, self-identity, control, and autonomy. And ultimately, both of those narratives can coexist, and both of those narratives, I believe, add another layer of context to The Velvet Rope. Because in Janet's 2022 documentary, when discussing Rene and his and hers relationship, he seems like someone who was very well intended, but felt a sense of entitlement and, yes, control when it came to Janet's public persona and career. And I think Janet's private persona suffered and became more aligned to the public one. With the Janet Period projects and the Velvet Rope project, we see Rene's presence becoming more apparent. And even circling back to the willingness to participate in the framing of Janet's sexual image, fetishism is defined as an individual being attracted to a non-living object or body part that is not the genitalia. It can also be defined as having an excessive and irrational commitment to something. And I mean, Rene does openly exhibit behavior in line with that second definition. In Janet's 2011 memoir, she reveals another element about their relationship. She revealed that after the Love Will Never Do shoot, a loved one said this: "You can't be seen in public like that. You look nothing like your video, nothing like your TV appearances. You can't go out." On this comment, she expounds and she says this: "I wasn't living life. Even though I was a homebody, it deeply hurt me to be told I shouldn't go to the movies just because I didn't look right. I wish I'd been able to cry. I realized now I was too numb. Crying would have given me some form of release. Once again, I kept it inside. I didn't answer, I didn't argue. I simply absorbed the comment, and as crazy as it seems, I didn't go out after shooting videos, especially if I'd gained any weight at all. Between tours and records, I disappeared from the public." So Rene, who Janet deeply trusts as this extension of her, is cultivating this version of Janet Jackson for the consumption of the public, which is being done at the cost of Janet's private and personal personhood. And I think that's the problem when you have the closest person to you intimately involved in your career and creative process. Because according to Rene, his involvement in Janet's career basically began out of the insecurity that Janet had as being viewed as producer dependent after the success of Control. Early on in our relationship, she told me she was concerned about being viewed as a producer dependent performer who was riding on her brother Michael's coattails. Janet told me that she was concerned that she was not being respected as an artist and that any gains she had made in popularity and control and career would be short-lived because she was not viewed as an artist. Janet's fears were typified in a cartoon that appeared in Rolling Stone magazine in 1986, which showed her producers, Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam, holding strings which controlled the puppet in Janet's image. I told Janet that she should start writing her own songs to erase the puppet image. As a result, Janet and I began writing songs together. We agreed that Janet would take obscene public credit for my songwriting in order to validate her image as an artist, but we would share the proceeds. In essence, we formed a partnership to collaborate in the creation of music and entertainment. Janet told me that whatever was created from our music together would be ours, and that with my existence, we would earn more money through her, according to Rene. And that's interesting because really, if you look at Janet's career, one of her main goals is to take control of who she is, particularly in terms of her artistry. The control era was defined so much by her taking control and autonomy from her father and her ex-husband. So for these narratives to form suggesting that she's not of her own artistry must have been frustrating, and I think that's a reason to the constant exploration of the theme of control. To entangle Rene in this quest for control is a choice. It's a choice. Because she's constantly having to prove that the music is hers, that the success is hers. And for Rene, it must be easy in some sense because he knows Janet so well. By control, they're in a relationship and he's been with her through her marriage. The start of her career is the year that she met Rene. It must be easy, but in another way, it's a mess because there's no sense of boundaries there. His job is to be Janet Jackson too. He's a co-writer. He's a creative director. To successfully contribute, he has to exist and place himself in Janet's perspective and contribute to her own ideas on things such as sexuality. For him to be good at his job, he needs to embody Janet Jackson. And he also, in some sense, needs to exert control of Janet Jackson. And her attitude on marriage seems to have allowed this to happen. Lessons learned at my mother's knee were subconsciously a part of my very being. Stick by your man. Loyalty is unquestioned and absolute. Never abandon, never give up. Tolerate what needs to be tolerated. Work it out. Understand. Let love see you through. It took me more than a decade to see the truth about my relationship with Rene. In the 2022 documentary, she reveals that was the nature of their relationship. He would say these things which would constantly undermine her, put her down. He had this fixation on the public Janet to the detriment of the private Janet. And it's interesting that after this first comment, the love will never do comment, she is constantly working, constantly presenting not as Janet, but Janet Jackson. I'm going to run down her working life. Ready? She filmed her role in Poetic Justice from April 1992 to July 1992. 2 months later, she starts working on Janet Period, the album from September 1992 to February 1993. She starts shooting videos and preparing to promote Janet Period from March 1993. That's the Way Love Goes comes out in April and the album in May. So at that point, the intense album cycle starts with live performances, more music videos, interviews, photo shoots, etc. The Janet World Tour starts in November 1993 and ends in April 1995. During the breaks on the tour, she works on Scream with her brother Michael, recording the song in October and December of 1994. A month after the tour, she records the music video for Scream, the most expensive music video of all time. She then begins works on 2 new songs and the promotional cycle for Design of the Decade, 1986 to 1996, a compilation album of all of her top 10 hits under the label A&M. Runaway and 24 Play were recorded around June to August of 1995, with Runaway coming out in August 1995. 24 Play was then released as a single in January 1996 with a video too.
24 play, 24 play, 24 play.
She then signs a new contract with Virgin Records in January 1996 for an unprecedented $80 million, again becoming the world's highest paid music artist of all time. That's essentially working pretty much non-stop from summer of 1992 to the beginning of 1996. 3.5 years. That's going from place to place, doing this to this to this to this. Physically, it's a lot. And how can a relationship and a marriage survive when husband and wife are constantly in business mode, in work mode? A marriage is meant to be this environment where 2 individuals should feel seen as their whole selves. There seems to be a tension with this notion. Rene's being is devoted and dedicated to this idea of Janet, which the 2 of them are both curating. What sort of disconnect does this create with your perception of self? Especially when you're constantly exploring the theme of control in your music. Janet, through her discography, has been going through this coming into her own as a woman, reckoning with her place in the world, and then being empowered by that control to stand in her power and truth. This is the public narrative, and this has been something that she's been embodying for now 10 years at this point. But privately, as she gets deep into her marriage with Rene, they slip deeper into the chains of codependency, where egos merge and identities are confused, as Janet states in an Essence interview in 2001. This is the whole thing that kind of made me want to do this docuseries. It was a quote from the Janet Lifetime documentary, and it was from her stylist, Wayne Scott Lucas.
It was a magic relationship if it didn't hurt so much. The control got so bad that I always said, how did you write that song, Control? And we all believe it. And then you marry a guy and the control is so stifling.
And I think The Velvet Rope as an album is an acknowledgement and an exploration of the turmoil going on in her relationship with Rene, and the emotions and process of liberation that Janet had to take. Come to terms with her notion of control and reconciling that with your true self. The concept of control is crumbling around Janet, as we see, both in her personal life and professionally. And through that depression that she enters in at the end of the Janet World Tour, she experiences an emotional breakdown. It's like everything that Janet has explored on the theme of control crumbles. Has she been naive? How could she be so naive in her relationship and in her marriage, in her career and in her identity? Janet was extremely successful. The record revealed who I was at that moment, presenting sensuality as an important and beautiful part of my being. I was feeling optimistic. I was feeling free. Within that feeling of freedom were seeds of discontent. I worked compulsively. There was a lot of pressure to achieve a certain look, and once I'd achieved it, to maintain it at all times. The photography, the videos, the world tour, the pressure was unrelenting to look a certain way during the entire process. In my determination to keep slim down, I overdid it. I underate and abused the laxatives to keep the weight off. In short, I didn't take care of myself. Writing, recording, promoting and touring for Janet was hard work, but I loved it. But I'm talking about 4 years of 18-hour work days, 6 to 7 hours a week, non-stop work, trying to look the way other people thought I needed to be. I was exhausted. No, I'm not going to point fingers and accuse anyone of manipulating me. I take responsibility for my choices. Meanwhile, the relationship I was in that had brought me comfort now showed signs of serious strain. Eventually it would collapse. In truth, I entered in my own free will. Again, it was a choice for which I take responsibility. I don't believe in making excuses, nor I believe in blaming others. In the end, that does no good. I began to understand that my view of people, especially some who were very close to me, had not been as clear as I had imagined. Doubts crept into my mind. Self-condemnation crept into my heart. I was assaulted by harsh thoughts. How could my judgment have been so poor? How could I have been so naive? How could I have fooled myself into believing I was actually a good entertainer? I now understand that my inability to voice my pain had a lot to do with the way I was raised. Keep your problems to yourself. I was afraid of burdening others with my anxieties. I didn't want to be a whiner. In a later song, In Better Days, I wrote, I don't want to waste nobody's time. My escape was to do what I've always done, work. The demands of show business both helped and hurt me. Helped me keep active, hurt by allowing me to sweep the dirt under the rug. I acted as if nothing was wrong. So by her own admission, she does desire to take accountability, which again, something that will go deeper when we're actually looking at the Velvet Rope. But she's not talking about it. She's not leaning into community. Part of me, again, as she says in the book, she talks about this is due to upbringing, where even within themselves, they don't seem to be really open with each other. They kind of hold on to their hurts and their upsets. They hide their own marriages and their personal lives. During the press run of The Velvet Rope, Janet reveals that she hadn't spoken to Michael in about 2 years. When you're not community-minded, you hide and you find solace in yourself. But what do you do when you're fragmented? When who you are is distorted? Who can you run to? Your husband? The one that's with you 24/7, even when you're bearing your soul in the lyrics of The Velvet Rope. They can't really see you. the one who in many ways has shaped and become you, even they can't see you. How do you grow? How do you heal? How can you be the one in control? That's what the velvet rope is. It challenges this notion of who you are within, in your relationships, and how to recover, how to face your pain by yourself and for yourself and find peace. And I think the destruction of her relationship with Rene is the most important part of it. And it's almost this final piece to pushing her to find this true self, to go beyond the velvet rope and actually meet herself at her needs. And this is something which we'll see is paid off at the end of the Velvet Rope album. So in the next part, that's when we're going to be properly diving in to the Velvet Rope, unpiecing and unpacking the arc within the album. But I want to leave off with this, and this was a letter that Janet wrote in her Essence magazine cover story in 2001. And I think it sets us up perfectly for the next episode. Women have a hard time processing pain. At least I do. I tend to stuff it, or deny it, or deaden it by working too hard and too long. But I'm changing. I'm looking for healthy ways to process pain. I do it by sharing with friends the simple truth of where I've been, where I am, and where I want to go. My journey has been marked with twists and turns. The drama has been intense. My challenge, like that of so many of us, is not to judge myself. I tend to take blame for anything that has gone wrong. I am a harsh and cruel self-critic. I long to treat myself gently, but because of the privileges I've had in life, I don't think I'm entitled to acknowledge pain and loss. That nasty self-critic in me sees it as whining. As the youngest daughter of a family steeped in show business, I'm expected to smile, radiate happiness, exude optimism and joy. That's a pressure that I both accept and resist. I believe I was born to entertain. That's the public Janet. The private Janet is another matter. The private Janet likes to listen more than talk. If I go to clubs with my friends, I get too embarrassed to dance. I don't think I'll measure up to the other dancers on the floor. I stay at home with my dogs, munch on strawberry and cream, listen to jazz. As a little girl, I clung closely to my mother. My mother was my refuge, my world. My earliest memories are of waiting for my brothers to return from tour. I missed them terribly. When I was 5, the Jackson 5 were at the height, the world's most popular boy band. Along with everyone else, I watched them on TV, saw them turn into cartoon characters, loved them, even idolized them, but interacted with them infrequently. We were always apart. The great distance between us has never been bridged. The concern for family is there, yet the distance remains. To this day, we have never quite caught up with one another. The non-stop demands of show business has thrown us in different directions. I was close to Michael due to his sensitivity, his sweetness, the way he sang to me and danced, the gentleness of his soul, had an enormous influence on me. He gave me his attention. In his relationship to our father, in his fierce resistance to authority, I saw the foreshadowing of my own relationship with the man we call Joseph. The Michael I knew best was teenage Michael. He inspired me. As adults, we rarely meet, but when we do, it's not as strangers, but as a loving brother and sister whose knowledge of each other is rooted in the past, not the present. We cherish dear memories. We sympathize over the single missing element of our childhood, the fact that our childhood never existed. What family isn't dysfunctional? What family isn't composed of crazy dreams and demands passed on or imposed from parent to child? I see those dreams as gifts. Without them, I would get nowhere. Demands and desire commingled in our household. By desire, I mean drive, the need to succeed at any healthy cost. But early on, I knew that given so much dysfunction, I wanted out of my family and to be on my own. I married when, from all practical purposes, I was still a child, just 18 years old. I wasn't ready. I watched my first husband, James DeBarge, wrestle with his demons. I felt his pain, understood his pain, but I didn't understand the impact of his pain on his behavior. I wound up in the middle of a horror movie. Broken-hearted, disillusioned, I threw myself into work, into a career that at first was still tied to my father. I broke that tie in the name of Control, my third album. That was in 1986, while I was still not yet 21. Control is a wonderful thing, but control is an illusion. No one but God is in control. That took me a long time to learn, another 14 years. The more we cling to the notion that we are in control, the greater the delusion. I admit, I was deluded. I married again, but this time in secret to Rene Elizondo, convinced that privacy would better protect the sanctity of our bond. As a wife, I reasoned that the private Janet would have a better chance than the public Janet. Lessons learned at my mother's knee were subconsciously as part of my very being. Stick by your man. Loyalty is unquestioned and absolute. Never abandon, never give up. Tolerate what needs to be tolerated. Work it out, understand, let love see you through. It took me over a decade to see the truth about my relationship with Rene, and it happened on an evening when I thought I was going blind. I was in Lyon, France, in 1989 on the Velvet Rope tour, in two separate incidences, one which involved my dog and the other a magazine that had grazed my eye. My corneas had been scratched. Somehow I made it through the show, but afterwards my eyes were burning so bad that even lights on the dashboard felt like daggers. The throbbing was excruciating. We went looking for an hospital. It was past midnight, where an inpatient nurse applied a salve that only made it worse. Back up the hotel, my eyelids were swollen to the size of lipstick pencils. I cried all night. When the morning came, I couldn't see. But where my eyes had failed, my heart saw a clarity that I'd never seen before. I saw my marriage for what it was. It was that simple. My husband's concern was elsewhere. Other things dominated his attention. Secret things I'd failed or refused to recognize. I won't say what these things are because they're not mine to reveal. We were ensnared in a sick, sad dance. The dance involved hours of therapy, but very little sincerity. The sickness was subtle. We had very few arguments, there was no physical abuse, but double lives were being led, hidden agendas were being pursued, and I was seeing what I never wanted to see, or admit. I dislike admitting it here. I'd been played. Millions of women had gone through this, so why is it so hard to admit that I'm among them? The public Janet feels obliged to protect positive vibes. The private Janet feels obliged to take blame. I feel like I should have known better, seen it coming, been smarter, wiser, shrewder. But you learn what you learn when you learn it. The chains of codependency, where egos are merged and identities are confused, are strong. To break them requires real determination. Those chains had been binding us for generations. Our parents' patterns, inherited from our parents, can haunt us for a lifetime. I'm grateful that my eyes were open, and my heart, though broken, is on the mend. Now, let's go behind the velvet rope. The velvet rope, a divider, it's a separator. Used in events and nightclubs to illustrate exclusivity and class among its attendees. It's interesting that a place which can and has historically offered people freedom and liberation with music, dance and body movement, something that Janet Jackson experienced at age 10, visiting the famous Studio 54 in New York with her brother Michael. Studio 54 was very formative for Michael, aligning with his deep passion for dance and music, and inspiring his deeply transformative and groundbreaking fifth studio album, Off the Wall. But nightclubs also served as a major influence for the Velvet Rope, not just the liberation that could be offered on the dance floor, but how the Velvet Rope serves as a microcosm to the greater social ills and pressures and how they manifest in our lives, hindering freedom, growth, community, pleasure, and liberation. There are two major threads to the creation of the Velvet Rope album and what it chooses to explore. The Velvet Rope sees a much less confident, secure woman as the one in Janet period. Control is a consistent theme to consider in Janet's music, as it has underpinned the conceptualization of her three previous projects: Control, Janet Jackson's Rhythm Nation 1814, and Janet period. As explored in episode 3, Janet, by the end of the Janet World Tour in 1995, has become incredibly disillusioned with herself, this image that she, along with her husband, Rene Elizondo, have created. This identity came fighting out the gate with Control, wanting to break free from her marriage and family and come into her own. With Rhythm Nation,
Still in the high from her first taste of autonomy and control, she wishes to form the world in her own image, free from injustice and inequality. With Janet period, she returns to looking inwardly, showing mastery of self and self-confidence, expressing sensuality so confidently. We also explored how Rene was part of this cultivation, a sign of their codependent relationship, but also a sign of how Janet's idea of control is an illusion. She has fought so much for her own control, at what cost? And for who? Because this control has allowed herself to elevate to this fantasy just to be commodified, shown to be evident with the commercial and critical success of her music. For example, with the Janet Period album, all 6 of its commercial singles were top 10 singles, and it's her best-selling album. But personally, all it has done is trigger deep insecurity and pain. When asked how long it had taken her to develop the concept of the velvet rope, she says, "I say 31 years. My lifetime. You see, on this record, I've decided to ask myself questions I hadn't asked before. Like everyone else in the world, I've gone through periods of great sadness. I never looked deeply at the pain from my past, never tried to understand that pain and work through it. It's a journey I'd avoided, but one now I have to face." Janet's insecurity is rooted in her childhood. The youngest daughter in a superstar family, she has spoken on the feeling of comparison and insecurity that she has felt. Naturally, your brothers are the Jackson 5, and through her upbringing, they were very disconnected due to the nature of their career of touring, recording, and performing. So this concept of the velvet rope manifests itself as this divider within community, friends, and family, which inhibits affirming connection. Family is often our first community, and within every family exists dysfunction. In the case of the Jacksons, a lot of this dysfunction seems to be rooted from their father, Joe Jackson. As discussed in episode 1, he is the architect of the Jackson family, becoming this franchise. And for this to be possible, he had to forego his role as these children's father. He was incredibly strict and focused purely on their success as musical artists and not necessarily in the nurturing of them as emotional and socially functioning creatures. This is exemplified in him saying, "Don't call me dad, call me Joe." The velvet rope here serves as this boundary between two individuals, prohibiting connection, affection, and love.
It's very tough. Jacksons don't cry.
Is that the...
Tough.
Really?
Janet says this in her memoir. "We don't know that love is something that already exists within. We act like it has to be earned. Our attitude is, if we pleasure others, we get love for ourselves. But except for those brief moments where the world awards us, that approach makes us miserable." For Janet, this manifested in intense body image issues from young. Her brothers constantly teased her for her weight. Michael created this nickname, Dunk, in reference to her being more pudgy. During puberty, Janet's career in the entertainment industry began as a childhood actress, starring in the 2 final seasons of The Good Times as Penny, a young girl who's experiencing abuse and violence at the hands of her mother. And imagine being 10 to 11 and being told by the production team that you're too overweight, to the point where they would have to bind Janet's breasts in order for her to play the role. You're already being wired to perform, to give yourself away at the detriment of your own childhood, and then your body is being viewed as this almost commodity at the age of 10 years old. Here, the velvet rope manifests as this block from understanding and valuing your true self. Because your life is a sacrifice, you're constantly performing, acting, singing for other people. Your pleasure and your need to self-actualize, which would actually begin to cultivate during your adolescence, is being twisted and suppressed. As you fulfill your own need by giving pleasure to others, fulfilling their needs. And this sadly makes sense to the fact of why she married James DeBarge. But it's also a pattern that seems to have taken place in her relationship with Rene. With Rene believing for him to fulfill his own needs, he needs to fulfill Janet's needs. This leads into the interlude of the Velvet Rope album, Twisted Elegance.
It's my belief that we all have the need to feel special. And it's this need that can bring out the best in us, yet the worst in us. This need created the velvet rope.
I wonder how differently the world would be if we all saw each other as special, deserving of love, care, attention, and the ability to fully come into our own individuality. And it's interesting how this album starts off with a manifesto very akin to Rhythm Nation 1814.
We are a nation with no geographic boundaries, bound together through our beliefs. We are like-minded individuals, sharing a common vision, pushing toward a world rid of color lines.
Interestingly, the emotional breakdown that takes place at the end of the Janet World Tour isn't the first time this happens. It happened after completing her first record-breaking Rhythm Nation tour. Internally, with all this social Western, I'm calling it Western, but it could be global general socialization, is this discord with the success that takes place around you. And I understand, because we all have these feelings of fraudulence and, we call it imposter syndrome. Yet, imagine you have this massive moment, like you actually able to meet the people that are being impacted by your music. And then your mentality is just saying like, oh no, I don't deserve this. Like, they can't really be here to see me. Like, what is it they see in me? And it's that disconnect with what you are accomplishing and what you are positively putting out and how positive you are as an individual, that specialness inside of you. And then this socialization, which is just trying to make you not see that you are special. And again, I understand the feelings of fraudulence, but it's interesting that we continue to put ourselves in situations to receive praise, attention, and adoration. Because deep down, we know that validation, acknowledgement, and recognition is important. Yet we starve ourselves and suffer from it, despite the fact that we actually crave it. And this all starts from childhood, I believe. It all starts from childhood. And again, we'll continue to explore that as we get deeper into the album. Now, going back to the second thread of the creation of this album, there's a socio-political point which was directly a part of the creation of this album.
And so we were having this end of tour, at least the European leg party at Le Bandouche, and I went outside to say hi to the fans. It was snowing outside, and I just said, "Come on in, you guys. You're coming into the party." And the doorman said, he goes, no. We don't let these kind of people in. So I went upstairs. I went back inside the club and went up onto the balcony where Janet was. And I said, I just want them to come in. And she goes, okay, is it sorted out? I said, yeah, they said they're going to bring them in. And then I looked over the balcony and they had sequestered them into a corner with velvet ropes and told them, you're not allowed to interact with the rest of the VIPs or whatever. And It literally upset me so much, where I felt like, isn't it crazy how this world is structured in such a way, these protocols and hierarchies that are born out of insecurity that make people say, you're a VIP, you're not a VIP. And that to me was the thing. And that was how her album, The Velvet Ropes, that's how we did the Velvet Rope.
So here the Velvet Rope is representative of a class divide. And that's something that's very important within this album, as it's almost, again, it's this evolved message from Rhythm Nation, properly reflecting on injustice and Janet using her pain, and the pain being this enabler to better understand and empathize with others. Which is funny, again, how culturally it's become this thing to hide away our pain and act as if nothing is going on and really mask what's going on inside. Something Janet's had to do her entire life. And again, she said how it was her privilege and her success that allowed this mindset to thrive for so long, to not process the pain. Pain is a velvet rope in and of itself. To take down a velvet rope or the velvet rope means to drop the facade, to process pain and allow those barriers that we put up to prevent people from getting to know the real us. That's where the theme of control crops up, because all of her music is this exploration of the ways in which the velvet ropes have entrapped her from her true self. Where there's this constant need to validate who she is as a person, and that comes so strongly through her 3 previous outputs. But then you see how they were also important in allowing her to take down some of these velvet ropes and allowing her audience and herself to see and value her true self.
in all of its innate specialness. But there's a specific narrative journey that Janet takes us down with The Velvet Rope, which is exemplified in the first track of the album, The Velvet Rope. And also I think it's important to point out when analysing the album, there's a dualistic approach I'm taking in the analysis of the album. I'm treating Janet Jackson as a subject of exploration and analysis, but also there's a version of Janet that exists and that's experiencing the album narrative that might slightly defer to her real self. Wow.
Have a special need to feel that we belong. Come with me inside my velvet rope.
It's an invitation to the sight of Janet's pain, which has been haunting her entire life. And that's why I felt an importance to really explore and understand what Janet was feeling at the time of the recording of this album. And whilst the album is her being quite frank and honest about what she's experiencing, despite not articulating it step by step, that healing process that she goes on. And it's definitely something you'll see as the album goes on, the narrative gets a bit looser in a sense. But it's definitely her exemplifying how to take those steps to walk through your pain. And she provides, again, almost this framework. We're not giving direct answers because my velvet rope is different to her velvet rope and your velvet rope is different to my velvet rope. And sharing how she avoids, hides, and eventually has to confront the pain is a provocation for you to then go do the introspective work on your own. And it's a shame that during the album rollout, this was not something that was focused on in the interviews. There was a lot of focus on Michael, her frank discussions of sex, having to defend the soft, critical and commercial performance of the album. Again, something which has always been part of Janet's public narrative, this need to kind of prove herself as her own. But ultimately, again, the desire for control is the antithesis of this album. And relinquishing that control is the whole point of the album. Letting down these velvet ropes that we hold and just being honest and vulnerable whilst encouraging everyone to take part in that process. It's a shame when she says outside leave judgment, outside leave hate, that the press didn't quite get that. You is a very difficult song to talk about because I have such a frayed relationship with accountability and honest introspection in places where I am wrong or forced to kind of take a look at what's wrong with me. Janet is a self-admitted harsher critic on herself. So yes, she does want to take a harsh look at herself and hold herself accountable for her behavior. But where I struggle in fully accepting the tone and rhetoric of this song is that a lot of it seems to be rooted in guilt and shame, and that's why I relate to it a lot. Ultimately, this song is Janet acknowledging that this version of Janet Jackson that she and multiple other people have been part of creating for the public and to prove something for herself doesn't actually serve her well. It doesn't negate the power, beauty, impact of her previous work, but ultimately it's a performance, a facade. And that's why the live performances of You and the music video, commissioned mainly as promotion for her 1998 Velvet Rope tour, uses a lot of elements of mimery, reflecting the mask one wears to participate in social reality. The mundane theatre, as it's known in sociology. The act of holding a mask is frankly exhausting, and if you force yourself to keep the mask up, working non-stop for 4 years, it's gonna kill you. And then when the mirror breaks and you literally can't take it anymore, you're gonna hate who you see in the mirror because it's not you. But when you hear lyrics like it's tough because it's true. It's true that a lot of the reason we are the way we are isn't our fault, and I think we all of us as a collective society, we deserve a lot of grace and empathy and care in order to kind of resolve these issues. But for me, that sense of injustice, that sense of I feel like I've been done wrong just by society, it wasn't like this mobilizing force for me. I didn't want to sit and be part of a rhythm nation. I wanted death and vengeance. And recently, through sitting with this song, I've had to say to myself, the mask you've worn for so long has finally come off. And you're angry and you're hurt for being deluded for so long. But in seeing things for the way they are, don't then miss out the opportunity to actually take things for how they are and just kind of having to accept it and ultimately just move on. And sadly, there's a grim naivety that you have to accept about yourself. And I'm super annoyed. Because I read this article review talking about how the album kind of comes across as a bit more naive, particularly in its discussion of sex in quite a frank way. Because sadly, through this process of kind of waking up and taking off the mask and seeing you realize that you're kind of at the start of this journey, and you have to get up and approach this new world that you know very little about. And that's very, very depressing. But it's up to you to choose to get up and just take responsibility from that point on, and choose honestly to confront your naivete and just keep it stepping. And that's tough.
What's the next song?
The one about me.
This song has a much looser role and meaning to the personal narrative, so to be frank, there is a bit more room for interpretation, but it's important to point out that that is part of the intention of this album. It tells Janet's story and journey through the turmoil, whilst giving enough space for the listener to insert their own perspectives, experiences and journeys. Sampling Joni Mitchell's Big Yellow Taxi, the song takes that proverbial "you don't know what you got till it's gone," with Janet singing mournfully about lost love. And I think every Janet album has a lost love song. Control has What Has He Done For Me Lately and He Doesn't Know I'm Alive, written from the perspective of a woman experiencing first love and it going horribly. She finds an incredible amount of strength in finding and gaining independence at this time. Come Back to Me, the top 2 single of Rhythm Nation 1814, mirrors that perspective of Janet through Rhythm Nation. She feels a lot more strength and confidence and is much more directly assertive and focused on her own needs, which is also a reflection of the rhetoric within the Janet album. But with Come Back to Me, it feels less textures, perhaps with a more optimistic and borderline naive approach on losing love. But again, she's very empowered by this sense of control to a fault. Again, of Janet period is a lot more mature, reflective and introspective. The song was written for Poetic Justice, a 1993 film starring Janet and Tupac about the growing relationship between postal clerk Lucky and Justice, a poet who's recovering from the grief of her boyfriend being murdered in a shootout. Playing this role and feeling these emotionals in this way, which feels a lot more three-dimensional, definitely influenced Janet's language and expression on Janet. And that's evident with a song like Again, which is not necessarily focused on lost love, but the opportunity to rekindle that. And that goes in line with Janet's exploration of sensuality and intimacy on the Janet period album. Got Till It's Gone is very different, as it reflects on the impact of having to look at yourself in the mirror and realize what you've been perceiving your reality to be isn't entirely accurate.
I could turn back, hands of time, make you fall in love. With me again, so would you give me another chance to love you the right way again?
And that's mainly because Janet's perception on control, again, has crumbled. This sounds like a lament, a desire to have that same sense of control that she once believed in so strongly, or it could even be interpreted as the desire to still be delusional, because ultimately, delusion makes life easier. To be delusional, it allows you to ignore pain and live in some sense of freedom to a certain extent. But we must accept the fact that we cannot live like this forever. It will be the death of you. The narrative of the song places the onus of the blame in the demise of the relationship that Janet is singing about on herself. The choice to remain delusional or ignore accountability wreaks havoc on you, but also those around you, encouraging you to act in ways that you can't even recognize or understand. because to live in delusion, it means you must forego responsibility and accountability for your behavior. You don't know how sweet delusion is until you're sick of it, and you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And that's a thread that recurs throughout the entire album. Interlude, Speak Fun. In this interlude, Janet uses a song which will appear much later on in the album, I Get Lonely, perhaps the most iconic track of the album. And I think it's interesting, despite the fact that song being this really explosive, emotional and expressive, and by far the longest track on the album, its presence here suggests that this is the point when those feelings of deep loneliness and isolation start to accumulate. And if you look at this album and really break it up into stages, this first half of the album seems like avoidance from the pain, the hurt, and this interlude exemplifies it best. Janet is on the phone with her female friend, who is apparently Lisa Marie Presley, Michael Jackson's first ex-wife and daughter of Elvis Presley. I think it's interesting that at this time, she's basically closer to Michael's ex-wife than she was to her own brother. And again, it's reminding us of the concept of the velvet rope. And she's playing with herself. And I think masturbation can mean many different things, but particularly in this context, I think it's reflecting Janet's state of loneliness and this invasive desire for someone to just meet your needs in whatever way possible. And again, it's interesting that you can be so stuck in your head that there's people around you, exemplified by Janet being comfortable to wank with her friend on the phone, but it's still difficult to really voice the true pain inside of you and allow the people around you to be part of the healing process, but also just be part of you expressing yourself. Boundaries are a weird thing.
Your coochie gonna swell up and fall apart.
My Need, built around a sample of You're All I Need to Get By Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. My Need expounds on Janet's need for her needs to be met, to the point of obsession. Craving attention can be obsessive, Janet confesses, and sexual obsessions may be the strongest obsession of all. When you see him, when you don't know who he is but you wonder what he's like, and when you want him. I'm singing about the need to pleasure yourself. She's completely fixated on her own desire. And in the interlude, we see her pleasing herself, but clearly it's got to the point where this is no longer enough. She needs something, someone to make her feel whole. She says, this isn't necessarily her singing about a well-acquainted lover like Again or Lonely off the Rhythm Nation project. And because I'm a nerd, let's even talk about that underrated track of the album, Lonely, and contrast this discussion of sensuality compared to this song, My Need. Lonely comes from a much more emotional place. Janet sees whatever sexual or casual encounter she's singing about in the song as a site for emotional connection. It feels like she's happy to give of herself and not really truly be assertive about what she wants.
If you're all alone and a friend you need, like a river flows, you hurt, I bleed.
On My Need, it seems like she's completely centered on herself. It does show some sense of growth on that all-important theme of control, that she feels more power to be communicative of her needs. But here there's a tinge of desperation, which I think is interesting to explore. And I think sometimes when there's a conversation about the way people utilize sex as an act of pleasure in their day-to-day lives, particularly women, can be so heavily stigmatized. And I think in discussing this, we can get lost in kind of a sex negative view and knock down casual sex and hookup culture. And I don't really want to get lost in that conversation, but how does the internal pervasive need for sex, for emotional and physical intimacy, how does it drive us to seek that connection in anything and anywhere?
It's so interesting to hear me talk about this because now I'm a 23-year-old and a sexually active 23-year-old. So
want to hear my thoughts about sex, but it is interesting having now, like, maybe got at a point where I've reconciled. It's because it is such a powerful vice at the end of the day. Like, it's a powerful vice, and it's a great way to find some sense of release or to kind of get out of yourself. I think that's a lot of what you hear Janet talking about. It's about releasing and getting. But when there is such a deep emotional roots that you're like unsurfacing about your life, I do think sex can become an interesting way to seek the validation that you want. Do you get what I mean? To seek the validation you want. How honest am I gonna be here? I feel like it's interesting because this is obviously I did this time ago, and I'm just like, yeah, I think for me, where I see it is in my relationship with older men. And I think, just to be honest, this year I got to the point where I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that anymore. Well, but, and I think like, what I think is interesting about myself and what I've really been able to learn about this one, because again, and I think I'm going to keep cutting in and thing where like the reflection has kind of changed. You have a right to being this free sexual person, and I think that's what Janet gets to in Janet and is kind of expressing on this album. But it's like, you do have to really enjoy that, and I think that's where we get to on All For You. We're going to get to All For You later, but that's what she gets to on All For You, where you're able to enjoy your sexuality and enjoy your autonomy. But you have to be able to acknowledge some things first. So, like, for example, it was me being like, yeah, you have daddy issues, nigga. That's got nothing to do with... Well, it has everything to do with older men, but it has nothing to do with older men as well. Do you get what I mean? Just in case anyone's watching and they're like, yeah, no. Don't worry about that.
There's a strange beauty, or some would say there's a twisted elegance to this fact. But in the same vein, again, there's this unfulfilling quality about all of this. Because what expectations do you end up placing in someone, stranger or not, that they can't live up to? In an ideal world, I feel like everyone would have this innate respect and value for people as human beings, and having this respect of the body. But that's just not the reality we live in. And I feel like in navigating this world of sex, again, going back to kind of the ideas of naivete, you are going to have to confront and figure out how you are going to navigate the space, because it can drive you to further loneliness and sadness. While I think the concept of soul ties is a bit techie, however, again, boundaries and expectations can be all over the place, especially if there's a dependency issue. Dependency and codependency is a challenge that occurs within Janet and Rene's relationship. So this could be one of the ways in which Janet is also discussing the nature of her relationship. But ultimately, it's a needs issue. Janet can't fulfill her own needs, so she seeks for just that itch that can be fulfilled in any way. And I think it just speaks up to how messed up social reality is. How do we meet our needs, and how do we allow other people to meet our needs, and how do we do that healthily?
I'm sorry. Now you can say it.
What was I supposed to say?
Chris is so cute.
Blanch your eyes. Fasten your seatbelts down. It's gonna be a bumpy ride.
Go Deep is for the club. It's for the club. Like, it's this encapsulation of the freedom and potential for release that can be found in communal spaces like the club and in community with your friends. You can be experiencing hell and turmoil, and you can have a night out where you can go out and just be free from your problems. And I think my experiences with clubs have been very different. And I don't know if this is, again, it's an indictment of how enduring the quality of this album is, and how it's really
an examination of human nature, and it's just right because the problems have got even worse. But because I think if you look historically, I think a lot of liberation and freedom, and that's again like, look at Renaissance, like that album, how club music and nightclubs can be this freeing space. However, it's not the case anymore. I feel like nowadays we're so obsessed with how we present ourselves and the way we're perceived at all times that it's even hard to just go into the clubs and be fully present and just enjoy the music and enjoy the dance.
Projection and inexperience. I was 19. This was like literally my first few weeks of uni that I was finishing this episode. I'm now again 23, so that's 4 years now. Going on to 4 years, and I love the club. I think I'm making a very valid commentary in how, I think that it is a fear where you, like, it's like, okay, like, I'm being perceived, and I think, surveillance culture with, our phones and all of that have definitely made that worse. But sorry, at some point you have to fucking go over yourself. If you want to have a good time, you have to just go with yourself. Go deep. Go deep. Go deep. Come on, like, do you get what I mean? Once you find it and you just don't care, you can go deep. Because, yeah.
In 1997, they had the pleasure of not having mobile devices and not having this additional pressure to portray a digital narrative, and of course the album touches on that too, but we'll get there. It also touches on this character arc of having to grasp with being naive and losing control. Janet says, there is this growing acceptance to the loss of control. And whilst Janet hasn't worked out or explored through the pain entirely, she's taking the world for what it is and trying to find joy in it, even if, again, there's this twisted elegance to it. She's finding happiness, however temporary, and again, making those connections to make herself feel whole for the night.
Next song.
In terms of club and feel-good music, Free Zone is go deep on coke. Thematically, it carries this beautiful message about the LGBT community and queerphobia. In Free Zone, I'm singing about how homophobia or any form of intolerance injures the soul. I'm singing about accepting yourself and living in a free zone, where the world accepts you. Because to truly be yourself, you have to heal from a lot of the things in your life which have inhibited you from being yourself. And Janet is working through that herself. And I think she does talk about how during the making of this album, she didn't go through a phase of questioning her sexuality. But this is how you know that the introspection that she's doing is good quality. Because once you go through all of these things and you realize how society has not allowed you to be you, you become aware that it's a very systemic issue. She's not alone in her suffering, or you're not alone in your suffering. Society doesn't really allow anyone to be who they are, I feel like. And the violent prosecution of the LGBT community to this day is a sign of that. And it's a shame that her solidarity with the community really kind of got overshadowed with a lot of, again, very vapid conversation and discussion about Janet's sexuality, which we'll also touch on later. In undoing the velvet rope, a free zone becomes possible, a space where everyone can be themselves in all of their innate specialness. In processing pain and trauma, you must also challenge certain dogmas and ideas rooted in your upbringing: sexism, misogyny, racist, homophobia. One rule, no rules. One love,
Free zone.
You don't have to hold on to the pain to hold on to the memory.
Together again. This track starts off with the interlude Memory, which captures an important part of the grieving and healing process, seeing the beauty, the twisted elegance within the pain and the trauma. It's reminded that life hasn't been in vain, despite all the pain that follows throughout. Together Again is about grief, particularly Janet paying ode to those who have been lost to AIDS. Again, another sign of Janet acknowledging and affirming the LGBT experience and the systemic violence waged against their identities. What is so beautiful about this song is finding joy through the pain and the loss. It's interesting that this is literally the album's midpoint. The turmoil that Janet has been walking through is by no means complete. However, there's still joy and happiness to be found. You can be a work in progress and still feel human, to exist without the need to be a perfectionist, to exist without the need to be perfect and have it all together. This was the first real and biggest, probably the biggest hit of the album. It peaked at number 1 on the Billboard 100 and sold 6 million copies worldwide. It was a saving grace of an album that, yes, did debut at number 1, but the fact that it didn't stay there past its first week was viewed as a problem. Got Till It's Gone was the lead single of the album. However, stupidly, Virgin didn't release it commercially in the US. With that particular song, basically what happened is white radio did not touch the record at all. It's interesting, if you look at the top 10 at the release of the time, there was definitely a space for this song to do well, but the label jammed, and it's probably the least commercially minded lead single that Janet had selected at that point in her career. However, Together Again captured listeners around the world. The beautiful house and disco elements, the very Diana Ross-esque delivery. The song is just about being human. It's celebratory in the face of grief. The music video is also important to talk about because it's in this utopic African setting, contrasting but also complementing Got Till It's Gone's setting of a colonial South Africa. This seems like a physical representation of the world that Janet envisions, with humanity having reconciled internal pain and suffering and the pain we inflict on each other. It could be heaven, where this promise of being together again is fulfilled. But again, it could also be a world which has overcome the velvet rope. There are multiple remixes to this song, and two I want to talk about are the deep and deeper remixes, which as they go deeper, they strip the song of its joyous instrumentation to more mournful R&B ballad stylings. There was actually a music video for the deeper remix directed by Rene Elizondo, which is much more grounded in the album narrative of Janet finding strength amid pain and grief. We see her finding solace and healing after the funeral of a loved one, comforted by the presence of a butterfly, representative of the loved one, but also this idea of metamorphosis, of growing through the discomfort and being able to fly and move on. Empty. This song is a perfect example of the enduring nature of this album and its prophetic quality. When this song was recorded, the internet was a pretty relatively new phenomenon, but now it acts as this second reality, with all of us having to navigate two very different but two equally real places. The song is about Janet singing about the dissonance between being so deeply in love with someone that you don't really know due to the amount of physical space between the two. Whether or not this can be interpreted as her even talking about the distance within her own relationship, who knows? But it's mad that even with the general inaccessibility of the internet at the time, that Janet is exploring this perspective. I like computers and use them to write and communicate with people all over the world. I believe computers are capable of tremendous good, but I also think about the people whose only connection to people is through a computer. I wonder what kind of reality that creates, and what kind of romantic frustrations it produces. After the machine is turned off and the electronic glow fades away, I wonder if you feel empty. And let's be frank, this is our current reality. We spend hours talking to our friends on our phones. That could be a bus journey away. And I think that need for physical presence can go fulfilled for such a long time. And I don't think it's something we really consciously think about on a day-to-day basis, but eventually that sense of loneliness will dawn on you. Like Janet, she's going through the album narrative and we see her talking a lot with her friends in club settings, and that's great. And however liberating and freeing those spaces can be, it's not really a moment of intimacy. You don't get to properly catch up with your friends and bask in just being in one another's presence. And if that's the way we perceive relationships, love must be a
a completely different ball game. And it's tough that for a lot of people, how we cultivate romantic relationships seems to be like pretty much solely online, talking stages, dating apps. It's a tough space to navigate, particularly when there aren't clear-cut rules. The damn disconnected is so sobering because digital communication lacks a lot of social cues and conventions like tone. Even the fact that you can wait the whole day for a simple response to a simple question. Again, if you compare this song to the whole of Janet's last album, which was all about, physical intimacy, this is a different person, and it's so sad. And it's a person that, like many of us, is struggling to make meaningful connection.
I think this song becomes very, very interesting in the digital age, and I think it makes it largely the most important song on the album. Listening to Empty, I just ended a long distance relationship, I think 2 days ago, and yeah, I think I was listening to this album, and then you're just like, damn, like, not what are we even doing, but the digital age can definitely create and it's interesting because I've realized the way you're experiencing emotion and affection is through text message, and then you then go through, like, the other adult aspect of it, which is, the disagreements and the negotiating with someone, and it's just like, bruv, what is this work? What is this all for? Like, what am I trying to simulate here that, like, I could just have in real life? Like, what is it that will... And again, it's the beauty of the digital age, but I'm not gonna say don't do it. But, like, we've got to remember it's also really important to have standards in, like, a digital age, and I think due to the accessibility of everyone, I think you could just end up finding some bums, and then your standards just remain low. And
But it also makes sense why sex is such a comfort and a ravenous need at this point for this Janet character, because sex offers a sense of intimacy and connection that we all yearn for, but it's something that can be found quite quickly in the mere act of sex. But how can we deal with this need for intimacy and connection romantically and platonically and be satisfied in a holistic way? It's actually something I want to do a separate video on eventually, but I think it's interesting that Janet's getting us to ponder and think about this, because in healing and in becoming a better human being, we have to build a community that's strong, and I feel like online is really messing with that. Digital spaces are really messing with that. So yeah.
Damn. Disconnected. How empty of me to be so full of you.
What about? We all have relationships somewhere in our past where we were wronged, deeply wounded, and we didn't have the guts to face the issue. We were so scared to confront the person who has done the hurting. We stuffed the pain. Well, if we're going to get on with our lives, the pain has to be faced, and the result can be explosive anger.
This is so interesting because I don't think you need to be in a physically abusive relationship to relate to, like, just the need to utilize rage. Interesting, like, this for me makes me reflect on my relationship with my dad, which is something that here I was 19, and then when I was 17, that's when I met my dad for the first time, and then that relationship lasted a few months, didn't go well, and I think you see me alluding to it when I'm talking about, feeling very, like, bitter about the world and, like, having to navigate naivete. There was definitely a lot of naivete in that situation that I've still not really been able to fully come to terms with, if not through rage, because I think rage is the perfect feeling that makes you release emotion, but then yeah, like, this isn't fair, and it isn't right. Alluded to my dad issues a lot in this particular video, but I think experiencing that, it's a constant cycle of thinking about how this like changed me, and I think that like it reverberates into all the types of relationships that you pursue, particularly like intimate ones. And I think about what's like dealing with like really insecure people, or people that like, oh, like you just shouldn't have been with. Damn.
The explosive anger. The song speaks to the emotions and feelings one has to confront with when dealing with domestic abuse, and particularly the aftermath of having to put yourself back together after an abusive relationship. For Janet, this is her having to confront the trauma of her relationship with her first ex-husband, James DeBarge. The confessional nature of Janet's music means we know how Janet has felt about that relationship over time. I mean, Control can be considered a breakup album in many ways, with songs like What Have You Done For Me Lately and its B-side, He Doesn't Know I'm Alive, a favourite of mine off that album. It, however, does paint the image of the relationship as just a kind of typical teenage love gone wrong, which doesn't really fully illuminate the extent of that abusive relationship. Black Cat off Rhythm Nation is a full-on rock song, incredibly subversive for Janet at the time, but it's fitting for the subject material of the song. The song is Janet singing this warning to a lover who is neglectful of her and wrapped up in substance abuse. Hearing the song and hearing Janet recount the nights she would spend as an 18-year-old driving around looking for her drug-addicted husband is sobering. It's interesting that actually this song, which is the first signs of a sexually liberated woman. With her 1990 VMA performance of this song, you see her rip off her chest, exposing her bra and bare chest. Exploring your trauma, and that being creatively, can be so therapeutic and allow you to find release and the ability to be yourself, more expressive and more free. She taps into this trauma again on her next album, blending trip hop with opera on This Time, on Janet Period, basically singing about why her lover needs to off. What About Off the Velvet Rope is more direct in confronting the physical and emotional torment Janet experienced. This is the most rageful she's been, and it's actually, I'm pretty sure, the first time that she's actually sworn on a track. What About breaks through a boundary that Janet had previously blocked. Singing these songs has meant digging up pain I buried a long time ago, she said that same day in Minneapolis. It's been hard and sometimes confusing, but I've had to do it. I've been burying pain all my life. It's like kicking dirt under the carpet. At some point there's so much dirt you start to choke. Well, I've been choking. My therapy came in writing these songs. Then I had the courage to sing about them or suffer the consequences. A permanent case of the blues. Domestic violence, like so many of life's serious traumas, can seriously impact the way you perceive self and the way you approach relationships. Allowing the pain to fester and sit will allow those experiences to remain trapped in your body. Rage is something that's so interesting, and it's something that's generally frowned upon, and it also contradicts this very sweet, gentle image that Janet exudes. But I think at some point you have to say F that, because rage and being angry and finding release in anger can be liberating, and it has a valid place in everyone's emotional process, because often anger can be portrayed as destructive and self-destructive, but there's something about anger that can also be quite productive and positive. Elements of this song have to do with me, she confesses, although she does not go into gruesome detail, and elements are from Rene's life. Abuse of all kinds, emotional, verbal, is incredibly common. The challenge is creating boundaries that shouldn't be trespassed. This is also interesting that this song is an amalgamation of both Janet and Rene's experiences, and I mean, which generally there's no problem with, but I wonder how, again, as we explored in episode 3, how the creative process of self-expression and healing is different when your experience, well, as a duo, your histories and ideas are merged into this one person that you're creating. How it can be toxic. And remember when she was talking about those chains of dependency, that challenge of creating boundaries could be something that she's still very much dealing with during the creation of this album. And with the breakup so soon after, it could be a sign of how Janet found Resolute and actually came to a place of understanding the kind of boundaries that she does need in a relationship. And again, it also shows the empowering nature that anger and rage can have, because particularly again in dealing with the aftermath of her breakup with Rene, we do see her tapping into rage with songs like Son of a Gun. I bet you think the song is about you, but again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Every time. There is a real change of pace with this song, and it's representative of how confronting your pain can be so healing and liberating. But it really emerges you again in this great sense of naivete. Scared of experiencing a love that can be real and everything that she's hoped for is terrifying for Janet, but perhaps it's what she needs to experience and to fully heal from her past with abusive relationships and low self-esteem. It takes this album concept of the velvet rope and explores how there can be this fear of intimacy, of truly letting go in relationships and feeling safe, something Janet hasn't really seemed to desire throughout the album narrative. Sex, yes. Long-term love and fulfillment, no. Maybe this is something she didn't see as possible, and it was going through this arc, that's something that she's open to. Again, it's interesting that feelings have been written about this feeling in such a precise way from a woman who's now been married for about 5 to 6 years, but still, in all of us, there's a hope in being in a love that's truly fulfilling and healthy. And in the relationship Janet was in, perhaps that wasn't a reality. But again, love can be beautiful and it can be possible. And it's interesting that how we're even kind of starting to tread into all for you territory, just in terms of the themes in that album. Tonight's the Night is the only cover featured on the album. It's a cover of Rod Stewart's 1978 hit focused on sexual anticipation and pleasure. The line,
"This is just between me and you and you,"
suggests that there's a threesome going on. Well, I mean, no, it doesn't suggest. There's a threesome going on. It is interesting that we're going from a song which is kind of celebrating the love between two people to kind of the jump to a threesome. It can be interpreted as embracing desire, being willing to explore and find yourself. Janet, in an interview during the album rollout, mentions even sexual questioning. Has she ever had a gay experience? No. Am I curious? I think every girl has wondered, more so than a guy. A girl can go there, but I have never. Like mentioned earlier, the album was really clouded by the salacious material in it. I mean, wait till Rope Burn. And a lot of the press run was Janet fighting the gay allegations. Janet chose not to change the female pronouns intentionally. Being gay and women having sex with women is a reality for a lot of people. So again, Janet being this ally makes her intentions clear. As we approach the end of the album, I think the lyrical content is definitely suggestive of a person that's slowly beginning to accept their full self. And I think going forward, the rest of the album kind of confronts, I think, what was the final step that was necessary for Janet to find this true sense of self, dealing with codependency. Even in this song, with it being a threesome, it seems like it's her negotiating whether or not she feels truly safe and content with the person that she's in love with. Yeah. Too good. This song is too good. This is probably one of the greatest songs of all time. Like, for real. Just the vocal delivery, the way the song is constructed, the emotional depth. I see this as a release to a lot of like the emotional build-up that's been going on through the album. We heard a snippet of this song just before My Need. And again, that's where Janet's kind of at the start of this journey, but she's coming to an end. I think it's significant that we're hearing the full song. She's finally able to express what's inside. Pain can isolate and make one feel socially disorientated and disconnected from those around them. But what we've seen Janet do throughout this album is choose different ways to confront that sense of pain, or even like avoid that pain. Because she's done it with friends, she's done it with short-term relationships, and now it seems like we're in a place where she's in something a bit more long-term, just talking about, again, seeing Janet as this character within the album. In being separated from this love, from this person who gives her so much joy, there is a yearning and a sadness in that separation. I also think this song is kind of a look into codependency and how easy it is to lose yourself inside a relationship and being consumed by their presence. I'm aware that hyperbole is a part of R&B, and particularly female R&B music, but again, if you consider it, put it really in context with what the album means and how it's really Janet or unloading a lot emotionally. These lyrics are coming from somewhere, from her, they're coming from within. And again, we know that codependency was a problem in her relationship. The chains of codependency, where egos are merged and identities are confused, are strong. To break them requires real determination. This song also does allow us to look at the concept of the velvet ropes a bit differently. Sometimes we can be so lost in how someone makes us feel and all that they do for us that your sense of self can become lost. When I was talking about What About and how the song is an amalgamation of both Rene and Janet's experience, that conflict, that tension can create a really troubled relationship with how you view yourself. You are the one that lives in me. It seems like Janet, through this infatuation with this lost partner and the feelings of abandonment, offers a bit of reflection on healthy boundaries in a relationship and how important it is that you're open and intimate, but you also have a healthy sense of self.
My lips hurt.
Rope Burn. Rope Burn is such a stark contrast from the previous song, showing how strongly Janet feels about her partner. It creates this polarizing feelings within, perhaps of insecurity and an insecure attachment style. This song paints a portrait of Janet and her partner's use of BDSM and sadomasochism, which ties to the wider narrative and themes of the album.
The whole rope thing takes a slightly different twist on a track like Rope Burn.
Well, I mean, there are certain things that I must say I do enjoy, but I'm not into this, oh, beat me through pain.
Right. Just adventure. Life's an adventure.
I think there are certain things that could be very sexy in the way that they're done. And then you can also go too far, I feel. But that's just me. For someone else, that's perfect.
Janet has come to see a purpose in her pain that she experiences and takes some form of pleasure in it. But also in illustrating like a complex relationship and dynamic with a partner, sadomasochism, that word. Finding sexual pleasure in pain suggests a strange dynamic. Janet is the receiver of the pain, and that makes her submissive in some sense, but she's quite assertive and in control of her desire. And then I just kind of wonder what kind of feelings can emerge from such a confusing dynamic, and how does that reflect Janet and Rene's relationship? We know how much control he exerted over Janet's being and presentation to a crippling level, but also again, Janet, she is the one in control. It's her image and her success that Rene was dependent on. I think this is one of the ways that Janet discusses and emotes about their relationship and its slow demise, which for me, again, is one of the most interesting parts of the Velvet Rope album, and with me now interpreting it as a breakup album. Again, I love the twisted elegance to this album, as there's a joy and celebration and intimacy in this song, but we also know where the emotional journey of the Velvet Rope takes Janet out of this relationship that she's singing so deeply about. It's not a question of what happened, despite, we've discussed that in episode 3. It's about how the music foreshadows this and how this song is a perfect example of that. How looking inwardly, you start to communicate things that you may not even subconsciously be aware of yet. We know that there was a sense of emotional distance and lack of care that Janet felt towards the end of the relationship. And the desire to just feel a rope burn could suggest that's the only way that she's able to really feel within the relationship. But all in all, I think she's using this imagery, this very vivid sexual imagery, to to discuss emotions, to discuss intimacy, showing just how important it is for those two things to be connected, sex, intimacy, and how you're feeling emotionally. Anything. Some are into being pleased, and some are into both. Here the pleasure is about loving somebody so much, feeling such commitment, that their pleasure pleases you, excites you to the point where you'll do anything. You're willing to take it further than you've ever taken it before. This song is very much an extension of Rope Burn, and it feels like Janet is lost in her partner. With Rope Burn, she's definitely more interested in what a partner can do for her, and this song is vice versa, what she can do for him. And the song is a bit less provocative, and I think it's important to kind of consider it as like the final song, not to the album, but to this narrative. It returns thematically to what the core of the album has been. Janet searching for a place to feel loved and accepted, and to be in a place where she can express all the pain within her. Do we see her get there fully? No, I don't think so, and I'll share more thoughts on that as we get to the last two tracks. But where she does end up is probably a most direct mirror to where she was when she released the project. She's in a relationship where she's negotiated or she's starting to feel some sense of security and comfort that she's happy with. But what this song feels like, it feels like someone searching for that final sense of assurance to truly drop the velvet rope.
When you influence me, can't turn back. I'll be your best, and all the good things don't come easy.
And I don't think she ever did. Our marriage died off bit by bit until eventually there was nothing left. Rene was always keen to start a family, but something was telling me, not right now, Janet, not right now. The pain I feel at the end of our marriage is nothing compared to how I would feel if a child had been involved. I have no doubt I would still be in the relationship, deeply unhappy just because of that child. And then, yeah, the album narrative kind of ends there without any sense of strong resolute. But also I think it's because, again, I think a lot of Janet's intent was for this album to inspire the listener to kind of embark on that journey of self-interrogation. And that's not going to be identical with every step isn't necessarily going to be laid out in the album. But it seems like there's a hope for people to see the twisted elegance in embracing your own pain and how that then affects the rest of your reality.
Nothing more depressing than having everything and still feeling sad. You must learn to water your spiritual garden.
Special. Special is a culmination of the album's main theme, the need to feel special and accepted and loved. Acknowledging how our childhood and formative experiences strip us of that feeling, we do really have to confront those barriers, those velvet ropes, to find a sense of hope and true inner belief in self. And it's challenging work, especially when it's easy to adopt a avoidance mentality. It's like a defense mechanism. Your brain rejects and runs from the pain, but when you choose to embrace it and conquer it, you feel freedom and you find yourself. This song is Janet singing to her inner child, and that sort of work can be healing and transformative. It's a full circle moment, and an important symbol of the album is the Sankofa symbol, which has origins in Ghana, specifically the Akan tribe. It's okay to go back and bring things from the past that benefit or help your future and allow you to move on. And finding special, not in a job or a career or a fame or a partner, but really going back and finding it within yourself, with who you've always been. That's what will make you okay and make you be at true peace with yourself. And Janet, she's really done that, and she's looked within and she's freed her mind, and in extension she's created a body of work that can empower other people to feel special too, and create it's like this utopic vision where everyone can have the space to feel special.
Work in progress.
Can't Be Stopped. Can't Be Stopped is a really nice way to end this album, particularly in Janet finding a sense of specialness. She wants others to find that, and particularly with this song being written for the youth, particularly black youth, there's a beauty in it. Janet, she's really trying to tackle something that's systemic, that's generational. Again, it's this care and intention that was found in Rhythm Nation and New Agenda, coming through in a way that is just more mature and authentic, I feel. There is a systemic oppression that comes with marginalized groups, and there's a way that can make them feel so unimportant, lesser, which causes them to hate themselves. And I think that's another reason why I wanted to do this series, because I wanted to show that. I wanted to highlight how important this album is and how Janet is casting this vision of self-worth and self-esteem that I feel like a lot of people do not find in traditional forms of media. There are obstacles and pain you will have to face from childhood, school, but also things that are structural and systemic. And if you start to do the work, Janet, she says, you know, she's a work in progress. But if you commit to uplifting yourself, you can't be stopped. It takes time, but if you give yourself time, if you be gentle, if you be kind on yourself, if you're self-aware and being cautious of behaviors and patterns that don't serve you and who you are deep down, if you fight through the pain, you will come out not necessarily richer, more successful, but you will have the ability to at least face life for what it is and how it is, rather than striving to be in control of your life, your music, your image. Relinquishing this staunch sense of control will release you from the burden of expectation, perfectionism, unhappiness with the way your life should be. And for me personally, the Velvet Rope was the start of that. The pandemic was such like a rough time for me. And honestly, I felt like I lost some sense of myself. This album helped me. It helped me notice things within that I needed to find for myself. And I feel like I'm still on that journey. Without this album, I feel like I just would have been stuck in this sense of delusion, this sense of escapism, really trying to run away from the pain. And that's why I feel like it needs to be celebrated. That's why people need to understand the value in it, and just the lessons in it, and what it says about self, what it says about the way we should navigate reality, what it says about growing up in your youth and just trying to form some sense of identity, whether or not you're in the biggest music family of all time, or whether you grew up with a single mother, having to really fight all your life trying to negotiate a sense of self that you can be happy with. So yeah.
Don't let nobody tell you you ain't strong enough.
Janet Jackson. You've heard the single, now the coolest album of the year, All For You.
All For You. 2001's All For You is a marked departure from the Velvet Rope and a lot of the heaviness that clouds over that project. But it's really a sign of how Janet has really been able to negotiate, one, through the pain, but two, to the theme of control that we've been exploring through this whole series. There is a freedom and just a liberation on this project of someone who has very little to prove, but is just happy in being themselves, and who's continuing to explore those different parts to herself. There's not really, and I think you don't really see this sense of identity negotiation going on from this point. So everything afterwards is definitely someone who's very firm in who they are. And I think that's definitely why I wanted to explore her life from 1982 to 2001, because I think it just tells a beautiful story. It tells there's a twisted elegance to a story of someone who is brave enough to show those different stages of really coming into your own and finding yourself. And I think the Velvet Rope is the climax of that story, and it's a beautiful story. And yeah, I hope this series of videos has illustrated that to you and encourages you to really, celebrate Janet Jackson and the complex artistry and the beauty of her music. This series has been in the works for a very long time. If you go look at the first video and compare like how much hair I have, shows you just how long I've been working on it. But it's something I'm proud of, that I've committed to this and hopefully told something beautiful. So yeah, this has been Behind the Velvet Rope, Janet Jackson on Control. Until next time, like, subscribe, all them things there. All right, lad.
Okay, we are doing an episode 5. So an episode 5 will be not shortly, but an episode 5 is in the works, which will be exploring All For You. Yeah, it's just very interesting to watch all of this. And I thought I'd have a lot more thoughts on where my perspective was now 3-4 years ago. Not really that much, but we'll explore it in the All For You episode. Thank you for watching. Yeah, oh my god, like, you've really watched a 2 hour and 20 minute video series on Janet Jackson.